I think we are at the beginning stages of a monumental event that takes place in the economic/monetary system about every 300 years. Once that trust or confidence is broken, then the run to gold will begin in a big way, and that will spill over to silver in a way that probably make the 1980s look like a warm-up.
Hello and welcome to Commodity Culture Interviews, where we break down the commodity space for both new and experienced investors. Before we get started, standard disclaimer, none of this is investing advice. Do your own due diligence. Today's guest is an analyst and speaker who specializes in precious metals and whose insights have been recognized by the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and Fox Business News, among others. He is also the author of the Silver Manifesto, which is very appropriate because we're going to be focusing on silver today. Mr. David Morgan, welcome to the program.
Well, Jesse, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So let's get started with how you got started on your journey to investing. When did you start? How did you start? And how did you get into the precious metals space specifically?
Well, the risk of sounding a bit corny, the truth is that I was an 11-year-old kid when the coinage changed from 90% silver coins to what I call the Johnson slugs. And I noticed that. I noticed the quarter per week I was receiving from my dad for watering the orchard, keep my room clean, da 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 da. I was just stacking them. We lived in the country, didn't have much place to spend them. And I noticed it, but none of the adults around me seemed to notice it. So time wore on, and I, just had this almost obsession about money and how things worked as a very young person. And then I started doing some self-study, and we had an encyclopedia set. I didn't read it all the way through, but I read some. Point being is I got interested in investing and the whole concept that you could like have a business by buying stock in a company and sharing the profits just really intrigued me. This idea that your friends and family got a brilliant idea, your friends and family pull their capital, they give you the startup capital, and you succeed or you fail. But that whole idea was like just really fascinating me. So when I turned 16, I was just pounding on my dad to let me trade stocks. And you can't unless you're a legal adult at 18. However, there's this loophole that he found for me. I didn't know about it, called the Uniform Gift to Minors Act. And he signed a document that allowed me to have a stock account at 16. So I started trading the stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average to begin with. So just been something. And what led me to precious metals is my interest in money, finance, banking, how the whole system works, all of that. And the more I dug in, the more I realized that when we're on what's called a fiat system, as we all know the word now, they always fail. And that the best prosperity for the people is honest money for honest people. And I realized really on further study, and this is later on in life, but a bimetallic or trimetallic standard is actually the best, not a gold only standard. A gold only standard usually morphs into a fiat fiasco, and then it blows up, and then there's a reset, and there's another system that usually goes back to gold or gold standard or partial gold standard. So that's it. I was just awake and aware at 11, but didn't know the consequences, had no idea. Years later, I would, get a degree in I have a degree in engineering and finance, and my passion would lead me to where I'm at today.
So you mentioned a trimetallic system as opposed to just a gold standard. Could you touch on that a little bit? Well, what is that
Sure, if you
exactly?
go, yeah, you go back, it's a gold, silver, copper. So many coppers stack up to equal silver, so many silver stack up to equal gold. And the only way those work really correctly is if it's a free market decision. In other words, 10, say 12 silver is equal to gold. So 12 ounces of silver equals an ounce of gold. And then if the system changes due to more silver in the system or less gold or more gold, it can be 15, the next day, which is an exaggeration, and then copper, the same thing. If you mandate that it has to be 15 to 1 always and everywhere, then there's usually an arbitrage opportunity that pops up. But most of the time, it's been a mandate where it's been a certain amount of silver to gold. And that, of course, is a bimetallic standard and works well, but doesn't work as well as it would if it could be free floating.
So before we dive into silver, why don't we get your thoughts on the economic environment in general, both in the US where you're at and around the world? Obviously, it's quite tied into silver and precious metals. We've got unprecedented money printing, very loose monetary policy. What are some of the challenges you see now and challenges we might see up ahead?
I want this to sound dramatic. I think we are at the beginning stages of a monumental event that takes place in the economic / monetary system about every 300 years. This is not a change from a gold standard to a fiat back to gold. This is a monumental change. Lots of reasons for that. Of course, money's always involved because on planet Earth, so far, to the best of our knowledge, in modern life, whatever that means, you have to have money to live pretty much. I mean, yes, there are tribes out there that don't, but I mean, for all practical purposes, everyone has to have money or you don't eat, you don't live, you don't have shelter, you can't, have warmth, cooling, whatever. So the shift is being accomplished and it hasn't been fulfilled. And the direction we're going is a technocracy that's run by these global elites. Primarily, the background of that are these white coats, these technocrats and banking elites that have a better idea. So one world government, one world currency, one world religion is basically their goal. And it's very, very significant that we push back in a nonviolent manner every chance we get.
Wow. That is definitely dramatic. But now let's hone in on silver specifically and the role that it might play up ahead. It's historically protected wealth, is used kind of as a form of insurance in to protect against hyperinflation, the collapse of currency. Do you still see it as that, and do you see it playing that role as we move ahead here?
Most likely. I mean, this is wanting to prove it to you, not that you wouldn't take me at my word. This is called Silver Bonanza, written by a good friend of mine, Franklin Sanders, did most of the writing. Jim Blanchard was also involved. And this is the opening page. I don't know if you can see it, but it's from Milton Friedman. He was at the 20th anniversary of the New Orleans Gold Conference, which is noted to be one of the best, biggest ever. I've been there several times, actually. But in his speech, he said the major monetary metal in history is silver, not gold. And that's true. But very few people even know that because they're not taught that and they're not taught to think critically. And there's lots of reasons why people dismiss silver as a monetary metal. But your question is, let's hone in on it. And do I think that, it'll play a part in the going forward? I think it will. I don't think it will play nearly the part that gold does. I did a series of lectures about, I'm going to guess 2 or 3 years ago now, probably. And my lecture was, what if silver were treated like gold? And the whole premise of that is if central banks treated silver as a monetary reserve like they do gold, the price of silver might be above that of gold in paper terms. But they don't, and they haven't for a very long time. I mean, silver was officially demonetized in 1873 with what's called the crime of 73. You can look it up on Google or a search engine. And then it really was brought back into the fore, obviously, if they were minting 90% coins in 1964 in the United States, and they did, and we had silver certificates, they did bring silver back into the monetary system after 1873. But it holds all the aspects that gold does. It's fungible, divisible, recognizable, relatively scarce. And the word silver and money is the same word in the Romance languages. So like 14 languages on the planet. If someone tells you that silver is only an industrial metal, it's not money. When you said that in that language, you'd be saying that silver isn't silver and would have no meanings, or money isn't money. What are you talking about? So it still does have a monetary role, but very few are hip to that. But as this system continues to crumble, there is an infinite desire for real money. People just don't know it yet. It's when they believe or lose faith or confidence in what they trust. Once that trust or confidence is broken, then the run to gold will begin in a big way, and that will spill over into silver in a way that probably make the 1980s look like a warm-up, because I believe there's so many people with the internet and this of communications and what's going on with all that we do now, that the word will get out pretty fast. And I think there'll be a logjam trying to get into the metals at some point.
So you touched a little bit on the industrial component of silver. I want to dive into that a little bit more because there's not a lot of people that understand just how vital silver is. It's used in basically all electronics, not to mention the whole new green economy that's being pushed. It's needed for solar panels and electric vehicles. How do you see the supply demand fundamentals of silver playing out moving forward?
Well, it ebbs and flows, but the trend is extremely clear. If you go back 2 decades, the amount of silver used for industrial purposes on aggregate, an absolute total, was 35% of the entire market. And now it's about 55% of the entire market. So in 20 years, we've gone from 35% to 55%. But the more important fact about that increase of demand for industrial purposes is 20 years ago, we only mined 555 million ounces of silver. And now we mine about 850 million ounces of silver. So we've got a bigger percentage of a bigger number, which shows you the trend is rather significant. So that trend will continue. There could be a year or two with the global contraction and shipping and the supply chain and all that. So, oh, look at that. 2022 was a bad year for silver. We didn't use as much in the industry. And same thing with 2023 or whatever. That's certainly possible. But the overall trend is still up significantly for a lot of reasons. As you outlined, energy is one of them. There's also, I'll get into the woo a little bit, but don't know how familiar any of your viewers are with Cliff High. But at Half Past Human, I've interviewed Cliff a couple times, and he talks about the new electrics. And he talks about a certain ionic relationship in silver at the elemental level that could be used for certain types of situations. And I'll just leave it at that. You can use your own imagination. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that silver conducts heat better than the element known to man, conducts electricity better than the element known to man. It even claim to have certain acoustic properties, and it's a vital element. As you said, it is the most useful element on a mineral basis. The only thing that has more uses is oil. The second most used element is silver. So for a high-tech society, it's going to continue to be demanded. And I'll go one step further, Jesse. There was a friend I've just met fairly recently named Matt Watson. He does independent research on all the metals. And his look at silver going out to 2050 shows that there is a crossover point in just a few more years where the total demand for silver will exceed the total supply, counting recycling. It's theoretical, but as I just pointed out, the trend over 20 years is not, it's there. That's a fact. And the trend isn't subsiding, it's actually continuing. It's not going exponential, but it certainly continues.
Manipulation in the silver markets. We hear about that a lot from people who stack silver. There's a lot of people complaining online saying that price manipulation is occurring through the trading of paper contracts, and this is a big issue and that it stops silver's true value from coming to light. What are your thoughts on the accusations of manipulation? And do you see a point where it has to come to an end?
Well, that presupposes I agree, but I do. So in the book, The Silver Manifesto, there's a couple chapters about fractional reserve bullion banking, which anyone that knows fractional reserve paper banking probably can make the change in their head to fractional reserve silver and gold banking. And then after that chapter, there's a chapter on manipulation where we go through and explain it in detail and use basically Sharpe's ratio to prove it's mathematically impossible to be a random walk. It's not a free market. It is a manipulated market. And there's been lawsuits that are proven, and the accusations of manipulation have won. they like to use semantics. It's spoofing. It's this, it's that. I don't think they've ever seen the word manipulation in print as far as the outcome of the verdict, but it is. So there was that part of it. Will it end? I believe it will, but a lot of silver and gold people have been thinking that for a long time, and it hasn't happened yet. Although it could be happening if we look at the market from two aspects, the retail market and the commercial bar market. In the retail market, we've had high premiums for probably a year now, and that's unprecedented. We've had areas where the silver price has had a huge premium because of Y2K. The bag market, I forget, got like a 40% premium or something ridiculous because everybody wanted to be able to barter with their silver coins if the power went out. And then it came back to normal. And we had these spikes like that, but we haven't had a steady eddy, continuous ebb and flow of a super high premium in the silver market until recently, and it continues. On the commercial bar side, even there, we're seeing some premiums that we don't usually hold. They're minimal, but usually they're basically non-existent. So I think there's a lot more interest in silver than the paper price might indicate at the current time.
Is there a scenario where you could see the silver price continuing to remain stagnant for years to come? Obviously, price predictions are so difficult to make. There's so many factors that go into it. But is there a bearish scenario you could see playing out for silver? Or do you think its true value is eventually going to shine through?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say there's some possibilities. I mean, I always try to look at both sides of any equation, any thought. So for one, there's been talk, and I did this at the Silver Symposium several months ago now, and I pointed out I think it was the last slide or next to last slide I put up on my presentation, was a Chinese outfit that had come up with copper being used in solar panels and claiming to be as efficient as silver. But I followed that story and there's nothing to follow up on. It just kind of just went away. I doubt it. Silver conducts electricity better than copper. But that doesn't mean you couldn't use copper. But will it replace silver for solar panels? I don't know. The other one, actually, going back to the gold show in New Orleans, when I was down there for one of my times to present, of course, we meet a lot of people, and one of the trade show booths had a solar panel based on aluminum. And so we actually interviewed them and kind of got the skinny on that. And in fact, I think I wrote it up in the Morgan report. But so one, there could be substitution of something that's significant in silver that could perhaps free up, let's say, 100 million ounces a year. But the main driver for silver isn't industry, although it's 55% of the market. It's always at the margin that causes a market to move up or down. It's how much, free floating stock you have, not what the market cap is. It's not how much is tightly held. I mean, you have a lot of shares out, but they're all tightly held and the float is tight. Any buying will take a stock up much easier. Well, there's a lot of it. Yeah, but if it's not being offered, then it's as if it's called the float. I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm not sure your viewers do. I'm trying to be very clear here. So silver's the same way. So as long as there's monetary demand, and there always is, but as long as that ebbs and flows, if you get in a situation where people want the safety of silver for whatever reason, because they're anticipating higher use in industry or because they consider it to be a monetary metal like gold, silver never asks the question, why are you buying me? It's just bought. So I would say, yeah, there is. The other scenario would be just a complete reset where everyone is either, some will agree, some won't. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'll speak for myself, we are forced into a global reset with a central bank digital currency, and the metals are basically outlawed, and that's it. So that's the end of it. And that could happen. I doubt it, but it certainly has to be thought of. So yeah, there are a couple scenarios or more that would give the argument that silver's not going to go anywhere. Again, I doubt it. I think we're going to see a huge spike in both the metals over the next few years, and then there will be a pushback through the cryptocurrency world where some of these cryptos are tied to gold and silver. And I'm involved with one of them, and there are several, and there'll probably be several more. So Remains to be determined, but I wouldn't be so proud as to say, oh, absolutely not, it couldn't happen. It could. I mean, the law, one, I mean, the reason silver is really where it's at is not considered officially money. I mean, if it were, like I said, if silver were treated like gold, that lecture I gave 3 or 4 times would be a monetary asset. But gold is a monetary asset and is considered a tier 1 monetary asset now, which means it is as valuable as any other monetary asset.
Silver bugs often say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Do you also agree with that, or do you think it's also valuable to potentially invest through ETFs or vaulted bullion?
So I'm all in favor of free market conditions. I mean, what I teach is that you should hold it and own it at first and have a stash that you can keep, handy. And once that is accomplished and you have the right amount for you or your family or your business or your pension plan or your IRA or wherever you're going to invest it, after that, I really don't care if you want to go ahead and go into the derivatives. It's up to you. If you want to go into mining shares, you want to go to ETFs, you want to go into options, you want to go into futures, whatever. I'm okay with that. See, there was another part of the question. It was ETFs. What was the other one?
Vaulted bullion.
Oh, vaulted. Now that's a very, very tough area because this is an area that most of the crime happens. This is where Morgan Stanley, for an example, UBS was involved in one similar, got fined because they had taken on accounts to buy silver, store it, and found out one of their customers did a pretty deep dive, got a law firm involved, and it was discovered that not only had Morgan Stanley not bought any silver at all, but they didn't even have a vault. And instead of being banned from trading the silver market ever again, which is, of course, what I would have done if I were the judge, but I'm not the judge, I wasn't involved. They just paid a fine. But during the proceedings, they basically said that it was standard practice in the industry to do that. So what they were indicating is that, and I don't know I want to be fair. It's quite possible, although this isn't a fact, that they held futures positions that were equivalent to what the silver interest was in their silver program. So in theory, they had an optionality on silver that was covered by a contract. Now, I'm not sure that's the case, but that's probably the most likely scenario. And of course, you have to vault it then. You just have to have a file. It's an electronic file. But the problem is vaulting. Most of the time when people lose money, it's because they've stored it at the wrong facility. And I don't want to scare anybody. I mean, most of the big major names, you're not going to have a problem with. They've been around for a long time. But for a quick example, this is somewhat embarrassing, but one of my members, I was recommending a certain dealer. In fact, I bought from him myself a couple of years. And one of my guys got a hold of me, by email, and said I was ripped off by this guy. And I couldn't believe it because I had just made a pretty big purchase for me and a couple of other people. And what he had done was he stored with this guy. So when your business isn't making a profit and someone buys, a reasonable amount or a large amount of silver or gold, but most people take the gold, very few will store it, some do. So you get that check for $250,000 and you just say, I'm going to store it, and you put that on the books and just make a note that you're going to get that silver sometime when the price is lower or whatever. All of a sudden you are lying, cheating, and thieving. And that's what happened. So the guy's out of business. I felt bad because I thought he was a straight up dealer. Also, but I did feel somewhat better because I teach my people to, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Now, I also do recommend storage for people that need to have storage. I am one. And I have a broker dealer. He also runs a hedge fund that's a friend of mine, has been that way for years. And I recommend him most often because I've been to his facility several times and I've seen everything that's in the warehouse. You can't do that on a lot of these storage programs. So if you want to be careful about storage, I would say go to our website and get on our free email list. And I will be writing about the pros and cons of storage. But that's where most of the illicit activity takes place, especially in silver, is that it's stored and it's really not there, or it's stored and it's really not physical. And this is a big, big problem, because if everyone that has paid for their silver actually had physical silver, I think there's a huge mismatch between what we see as a price and the amount of silver stored versus what the reality is. In other words, the silver market may have been overbought by 20% or 50% or maybe double. But since you're just getting a piece of paper that says it's stored at XYZ facility and it's not, well, now you've increased the silver supply in paper terms, but not in reality. So reality's got to match. And that's why when this run to gold happens, I think a lot of people that have silver will either want to take it back into their own hands or maybe sell it or whatever. But that's a big, big bugaboo for me about the storage aspect. And it's unfortunate that it's ever happened, but it happens actually more than a lot of people actually know.
Well, thank you so much, David. This has been an amazing conversation. Before I let you go, could you maybe introduce viewers to your service and your newsletter, the Morgan Report, and feel free to promo anything else you've got coming up that you think people should know about?
Sure. Well, thank you. Best thing to do is go to the landing page, themorganreport.com. That's themorganreport.com. Good enough for email list. I've been hit a few times with different things I've posted. So if you're on the list, you're not going to lose out on what I say for free. And then I will promote that anyone that's in the Las Vegas area on May 9th, 10th, and 11th, I will be speaking at the Money Show on cryptocurrencies and silver, and why I think the cryptocurrency or the silver and gold-backed cryptocurrencies will be leading the next leg up in the precious metals. So if you're in Las Vegas, and drop in, say hi. I have the last speaking slot on the first day, which is the 9th at 5 p.m. And then I'm on a panel about the future of cryptocurrencies the next morning, I think 10 a.m. So
Great. Well, we'll make sure to link to the Morgan Report in the description below, along with a link to your YouTube channel as well, where you do make content. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back on in the future to continue the conversation.
very good. Well, thank you.
If you want to see more on silver, check out my interview with the Economic Ninja, where we discuss silver versus gold, how silver is the Achilles heel of the global financial system, and the best way to invest in silver.